My name is Blake Brown, and I'll be the instructor for this course. Today, we are going to have our first podcast, and this will be over Russian expansion and sort of the situation of Central Asia. In Russia, in this early period, they're kind of usually given a back seat to things, but they're doing quite a bit on their own. There are two particular rulers worthy of note. You have Peter the Great, or Peter the First. He ruled from 1682 to 1725, so granted we're a little further back than we are with some of this early exploration type stuff. The second of these rulers is Catherine the Second, or Catherine the Great. She ruled from 1762 to 1796. So with Peter, what he will do is he will work to modernize Russia on a Western European style model. He'll try and emulate Western Europeans as much as he can. He'll import clothing. He'll develop a modern Russian army and go to Western Europe to train with them. He was so adamant about this that he woke everybody up in the middle of the night and had them go out and march in formation out in the middle of somebody's pretty nice garden and ruined it because of his excitement. He was subsequently kicked out and given a hefty bill. He will reform the Russian government bureaucracy, making it very similar to the Western European style again, and he'll demand changes in fashion. The most ill-received or problematic of them is he will forbid beards from being worn, which in Europe or in Russia at the time they wore big, grandfather type beards. Up until this point. He'll have a new capital built at St. Petersburg, and this will be the closest major city to Western Europe, kind of on the ocean. He'll have it built in kind of a poor location, just geographically speaking, is where he wanted it. Over 10,000 serfs will die to construct this city, so it comes at a great cost to Russia, not necessarily to Peter. St. Petersburg will be a gem of Russia, be a beautiful Western style type city. And he will make some extensive military expansions as well. Catherine's big contributions are she will have a huge military expansion, more than Peter the First. She will get part of Poland, at least during her reign, that they'll lose. And she'll try and create these great social reforms in and around Moscow and St. Petersburg. She will, again, try and emulate Western European lifestyle because she hated the way Russia functioned as a country and how the people were. She felt they were kind of backwater and that she was this high society lady and tried to bring her nobility into that sort of lifestyle. She will bring the opera, which will offer a nice, convenient distraction for the bureaucrats and rulers. And the serfs really didn't mind the opera coming in. That was a convenient distraction for the ruling class to keep them off of their backs, so to speak. She will make her palaces beautiful, I guess you'd call it, in a Western European sense of the word. Have it adorned with gems, precious stones, silver and gold filigree, things of that nature. Very similar to how Versailles is made, trying to emulate that sort of grandeur and beauty. She'll even go as far as having a golden stagecoach built. I mean, it's made out of wood and it's just covered in gold inlay, but still, that's not cheap to say the least. You can look it up if you'd like to. It's I think they still have good pictures of it. Her social reforms will be ended with Pugachev's peasant rebellion. The serfs really didn't get things very fairly in that society, and so they rebelled and crushed her social reforms. They did not crush her reign. It was ended in 1774, and she
ruled until 1796, mind you. So, in their expansion to the east and the south, they expanded across the sparsely populated Siberian area. That began in the 1500s and stretched out into the 17 and 1800s. By 1637, they had reached the Pacific Ocean, and by 1689, conflict with China forced them to temporarily abandon settlements in the Amur River basin. But they continued to add other Siberian territory. They also began adding territories in their southern fringe. And then the ultimate goal on this was access to the Black Sea and the Straits of the Bosphorus, allowing them to go around Istanbul but still have that water route. Water trade routes are always very useful in this early period before railroads become very popular. The southward thrust meant confrontation with Tartars. These are Muslim descendants of the Mongols, and the Tartars were a longtime threat to the Russians. In the 14 and 1500s, Tartars, Russians, Ottoman Turks, Poles, and Lithuanians fought for control of what's southern Russia today. In 1552 to 1556, they seized the Tartar state of Kazan, slaughtering many residents in the capital and then gradually gaining more lands. The Russians benefited from their new domination of the northern Caspian Sea. Also brought new goods and things into Russia as well. Soon they turned their attention toward Muslim Central Asia, settled largely by a Turkish people. That's why it's called Turkestan. And also they were looking into an area occupied by a group of people called the Kazakhs, which is now called Kazakhstan. By 1864, the Russians had finally gained control of all of Kazakh lands to the eastern border of China. Then they targeted the Silk Roads, where another group of people, called the Uzbeks, who were Turkish, Persian, and Mongol ancestry, provided a formidable threat. However, the Safavid Islamic Empire, which we will discuss in our next podcast, caused these people great amount of trouble and more or less opened the door for the Russians. The Silk Road cities declined because of the Safavid hostility, and the Uzbeks and their neighbors earned smaller revenues, and their merchants lost profits. And by the late 1800s, the expanding Russia was able to conquer all of southern Turkestan during this period. So that's sort of how that area of the world is functioning. We will take a bit of time out on the next podcast. It'll be a little bit longer, so be a little prepared for that. I'll have a slide prepared for that one as well, and we'll start on that on Wednesday. But these expansions in the other part of the world are important to note as well, as the big issues of the slave trade, and early next week we will jump into some of the biggest parts of this section and expanding into America and something called the Columbian Exchange that I'll talk about extensively. And those will be big issues for your exam, but they're also big issues for setting up the rest of this unit. But you can't forget these other parts of the world. Central and East Asia play an important role in the development, and their lack of involvement in some cases actually allows the Europeans to do what they do. So hopefully this wasn't too much of a drone. Like I said, on the next one I'll have a PowerPoint for you to kind of follow along. It'll be like 10 or 11 slides, real short. So we will move from there.